East Area Resource Conservationist here in Maryland. Last week, I believe you guys heard Brad, but today you got me. So today we are going to just have a conversation about working with landowners and some of the various things to take into consideration. Some of the things that we're going to cover will be developing a relationship, communication with landowners, some land access consideration, as well as barriers as it relates to language. What it is that we do for those, who may be new to the agency, again, you've been given your own introductions to NRCS at this point, but the bottom line is, we're helping landowners identify natural resources, providing conservation plans, providing, any cost share opportunities for installing some of these conservation practices. Along with that, getting to meet people and providing that service, we have to remember that, some of these other characteristics that are important, such as humility, integrity, being the providers or the producers need to be able to trust us, respect. There's a work ethic and empathy that come along with every plan that we write or every person that we meet, and that really helps build a successful working relationship with some of these and with everyone, basically. Developing a relationship. So a lot of us are coming in with various technical expertise. They're going to be in the agronomy, soils, forestry, wildlife, but along with conservation, we're also very much in the people business. And so that before any long-term or meaningful conservation actually takes place, it's been my experience, and I'm pretty sure a host of others, the understanding a relationship, one of trust that has to be established with individuals before they're even willing to do, or even have that conversation about things that are going to take place on their land. So making a strong first impression is usually done by speaking very confidently about what you're presenting, as well as showing that you actually are wanting to help them. Respecting the privilege and a responsibility that comes with being invited onto private lands. Landowners can genuinely tell, if you're in this to essentially really help them, and if you appreciate the opportunity. And this is what kind of starts that building that trust and relationship when dealing with a producer. Listening. So when we're going out with landowners, we're communicating with them, part of the 9 steps of planning is determining what the landowner's objectives are. And that can only come by way of really listening. And that's a skill that's going to be learned, that takes time and really experience. And it's very critical and essential part of the communication that we have with our customers. So our agency at this particular time offers a wide range of technical and financial resources that generally benefit our landowners. However, we can go out sometimes and we can either speak too fast, speak too much, or just speak sometimes with not having all of the information, and that can potentially hurt us down, in the long run. A lot of experience and expertise in really communicating with landowners, that it's a really critical part of the process. And so working with them, giving them your full and undivided attention is essential, especially when they're asking questions, right? So a lot of times we may go in there and not really know, or they may not really know a lot about what we're working with. They're their first time working with our programs or just developing a conservation plan. So really listening to what they're saying and listening and helping them further by answering some of those probably really basic questions goes a long way. Remembering that each landowner and the farm that you go on is very different. So listening is how we kind of gain that insight that we need to really help them develop the best alternatives. A lot of times you're going to meet producers that already have a goal in mind, already have maybe practices in mind, but really kind of listening to them and providing some additional alternatives could steer them in a direction that benefits them in a better way. Before we can offer or be of any real help to them, we do have to take the time and energy to listening to stories, the goals, the situations that they may have. You learn a lot There have been plenty of times, just going out, and if the circumstances arise, you're sitting at a kitchen table, or you're walking in the field with them, or they've come into the office and they're sharing. Taking that time is essential, because in there you learn a lot about maybe their limitations, maybe some problems that they didn't really know that they had, that you could really address. So when you're having that communication with your landowner, just be sure to listen to what their goals are and their objectives are, because we're coming in a lot of times with a lot of technical experience and just life experience and dealing with a lot of our programs, and so we may already feel like we have the answers that they want, but they have these limitations and they have these goals that they've expressed, but we haven't really listened. And although we may have this plan for them already thought out in our head, it's not essentially what may work best for them and the things that they have, or the limitations that they have. So besides listening, being very honest and having clear expectations, those need to also be defined. And this includes like programs and financial expectations, along with that can have problems down the line for us if these expectations are not met. So what I mean by that is, we're having these conversations with these landowners, and we're telling them about our, what alternatives they may have. It's very important that we take the time for us to explain how our programs work, what the financial obligations are, both from us and from them, making sure that there's clear communication about this. And again, when you're listening to their story, or when you're listening to their situation, you're able to tailor the conversation as needed, along with our programs and along with those financial expectations that might that are there for us. Be sure to, in further communication with landowners, be sure to relay information related to conservation plans with those that may also be assisting and engaging with the landowners. And what I mean by that is, as a conservation planner, as a technician, as a planner in just whatever phase that you are right now, you might not be the only one that's going to be touching that conservation plan. So if we work with engineers, we work with techs, we work with your district conservationists, or just whoever might be engaging in conversation, anything that may help the progression of that conservation plan, be sure to kind of relay that information, as well as, we all know we need to document, different bits, various parts of the process in the conservation plan. But when you're having a conversation, if you're meeting with a team, communicate things with the other members of the other people that may be working with this plan, so that if you have to leave or you're not there, the landowner, because they've started to develop a relationship with you. And so when you are absent, it sometimes might stall a situation if they don't feel this person that's now working on their plan is up to, has all the information. And so that hesitation that they may have had in the beginning may come back, because they don't feel like they're in the hands of the person that initially started them on this journey. So try to keep everyone engaged that may have some conversation, that may have some dealing with this plan, so that if you're out in any way, you can help to relay that information, or you can help to, with the landowners, trust and, again, continued relationship with us. Try to anticipate any questions the landowner or customer might have regarding conservation plans or engineering, construction activities related to the information, right? So it's not always the easiest thing to anticipate questions, but based on maybe the conversations you've had with them and what they've shared, there are some things we can, take into account and be ready to answer. We have a lot of guides that have been put together for us. We have job sheets. We have different conservation practice standards and different things like that can help facilitate that conversation more and help us to answer some of those questions that may come along, especially with a newer landowner or a newer customer that be working with us. As you grow and you gain experience, you tend to know what some of those questions might be, although there's always the there's always room for that question that you're just never really prepared for. But again, with that, I do want to make sure that you don't develop this feeling of that you have to answer everything and have all the answers at once, because there's absolutely nothing wrong with saying, I'm not sure right now, I can get the answer for you. And that also is something solid that that producers and landowners appreciate, because you're not just feeding them something that is essentially not going to benefit them in the long run. So definitely try to anticipate questions. But if you can't, there's nothing, if you're not able to answer a question, there's also nothing wrong with letting them know that you can get back with them with the answer, and at a later date, and that you'll be sure to take care of any needs that they may have. Also providing ways and other channels of appropriate communication with the landowner about programs, about projects, depending on the scope or timelines, different things like that. We work with a lot of different partners. A lot of those we've heard on our calls and in these trainings so far, providing phone numbers and websites to other agencies that may assist them in getting answers to those questions. A lot of websites will also have related job sheets and different standards that may assist them in getting those questions answered. Establishing email correspondence when dealing with other things related to projects and deadlines, giving them some access to you by way of communicating with you, through phone and email, providing that that information highway so that they know that if there is something, there's a problem with a project, while it's going on or before they start, they can call you. That was something that I know myself and a lot of other planners, you develop that relationship with them and they know they can call you before a project starts. I was always very, adamant about my producers, because I personally don't want you to get into a situation where, we've already done something and it doesn't necessarily meet our standards and specs, and we've already, gone a little bit too far, and has to cost, more money or more time. So making sure that we are opening those channels of appropriate communication with our landowners is essential for building that trust and keeping the lines of communication open. Just some, if I thought this was kind of interesting, and for those who, maybe getting used to learning to talk with like various individuals, getting them to maybe open up a little bit more. Effective listening techniques. A lot of times we're trained to, go out, talk, go through the process, but a lot of what we do requires a lot of listening, and we will miss valuable information if we don't, or we can maybe nudge our producers in the right direction by asking certain questions. So, asking open-ended questions encourages sharing. And by that sharing, we get the information that we're really looking for and can give them the best service that's actually needed. So, if they're talking about something, reinstate the question, hey, let me see if I'm clear about this. This is what you want, when talking about objectives or goals, or just what as it relates to something that you need clarity on. Summarizing something. So it sounds to me as if, those are questions that will help encourage them to share more. What have you been thinking about while waiting for this to take place? What would happen if you, kind of give them some, a start to getting more information that you potentially will need. Emotional labeling, a lot of times when people are dealing with finances, or there may have been situations where family land has been passed down, and they're really nervous or anxious about something, help them. We can help through the process of how we're able to help, and work with them to guide them through this process. You'll find working with a variety of producers, you're going to find a variety of scenarios. There's really no scenario that's essentially going to look alike. So we have to change up the way we're communicating potentially with each person that we're coming in contact with. So learning to develop those different techniques are essential when dealing with a variety of different customers. Clarifying your statements. Am I understanding you correctly? Could you tell me more about X, Y, and Z? And then also allowing for yourself to silence yourself or to quiet yourself to listen more, to make sure that there's no anxiety that's being produced by the rapidness of how you're asking something. Also something that, as state, federal officials, we have a tendency to use a lot of acronyms, and that can be a little jarring at times for individuals. So learning to speak in sometimes more layman's terms may, calm a situation down, may calm an individual down and make them more receptive to responding to you, and just sharing more. So I just thought this was a really interesting list of techniques that would help with communicating. Another thing I wanted to speak on was land access considerations, and this one is important wherever you go. And if you transition to other parts of the country, or even within the state, just depending on who owns the land and who has rights and things like that, this can become extremely important. But it's important overall because ensuring that you have the landowner's permission to access the property is very key and very helpful when working or when building that trust and building that relationship. Because up to this point, there's no guarantee that you've actually had these initial conversations out on the actual property or the land. They may have come into the office. You may have, been dealing with this over the phone. So up to this point, you might not necessarily have had access, been granted access or had this conversation there. So one of the things, that was taught to me very early on is respecting signs, respecting any warnings posted throughout the property, because it is a privilege to be granted access onto somebody's land. They're giving you access to something that's very personal to them, to something that is their livelihood. And if they're not accompanying you, they are giving you access to a part of, resources that are important to them. So respecting those signs that are on fences, on barns, on fence posts, just wherever those signs are, be very, very mindful of those. Remember to clearly communicate the conditions under which you'll be accessing the property, whether, if they've given you clear instructions on to go into the north gate, leave out through the, this gate, or, you're coming in the morning, you're coming in the afternoon. Hey, do I need to do this? If you're confused about something, make sure you have some way to contact them to get some clarity on how they would like you to enter or exit the property. If there are issues where you're not able to get in, you're not able to access without, and you haven't really gotten consent, it's best to kind of not do that until you have the proper consent or consent to access their property. Be very considerate and respectful of livestock and animal behavior. And I don't think I really have to go into that much on the call just based on who's on the call. But, this is, again, individuals' livelihoods, and just for sake of common decency, be very considerate and respectful of livestock. And it's actually beneficial to learn a little bit about animal behavior, and sometimes the type of vehicle that you may have, the condition that your vehicle might be in may be startling to some, and just maybe asking some of those questions up front can be helpful to the situation overall. If landowners are new to working with the agency and would like to accompany around your property, I've had that happen where they want to be there, and that's more for probably reassurance on their end, but definitely they want to actually show you specifically. Make sure you're working around their schedules, because that helps make them feel comfortable. It also reduces a lot of the questions you might have in developing, when doing your resource inventory and when trying to think about alternatives. And you can talk directly with them about some of those things that you may have been thinking about that would accommodate their goals and their objectives. So, try to accommodate as best as possible to work around their schedules. A lot of times, our landowners, for the most part, are 100% farming, but then you do have some landowners in some cases that may have jobs elsewhere, or they may live, they farm 50% of the time, or they live out of state and they're coming in. This is land that they've been managed or they've leased out, and they're flying in. I've had that. So, so you have got to accommodate as best as possible to accomplish everyone's goal. Again, this is just reiterating what I said at the beginning, leaving the barn, the fencing, the gates, not beyond just respecting the signs. It's leaving the place better than when you found it. Closing barns, closing fences, closing gates. That keeps the trust that you are trying to establish, as well as make it easier the next time that you have to come out now. And then, a lot of times we may have to do we have to invite engineering out, and that may take several vehicles, that may take more equipment. And so now they know that they can trust you with their space. And something that, I think other people that have been working with landowners and just in this capacity for a while knows that word travels extremely fast in the farming community. And it doesn't take a lot for a reputation to be ruined. And so when you are working with landowners and you're in a community, doesn't necessarily have to be a small community, but they talk to each other. And if there's word gets out that you haven't been as respectful or you've done something, that can maybe ruin the chances for yourself or for someone else that may want to do work with individuals later on. So just, again, this is just some considerations when coming onto individuals' land.
Hey,
Language barriers. So
let you know you got about 4 minutes left.
I'm speeding through. Okay. Language barriers. So the face of agriculture is changing. We all know this. There's an increased chance of working with a lot of different groups, a lot of different languages and communication. So be mindful of that, right? So take the time to lend some more consideration when we're handing out or dealing with the written communication or verbal communication. We have outreach and communication efforts that are there. When reaching out to some of our potential customers, we should, like I said before, try to avoid as many acronyms or abbreviations. When explaining concepts and information, request that you let them know that at any point during the conversation, let them stop you and so you can explain yourself to them if there's a need. Also, let them know that, again, that's important for program reasons as well as financial or other contractual obligations. Keep that conversation and that line of communication going back and forth. Working through some of these language and communication barriers will help to eliminate undue stress later. Within the agency, if you do find yourself in that situation, NRCS has several different avenues to help with that. A lot of our documents now, from the application to other job sheets or fact sheets, things like that, can be found in other languages. We have the limited English proficiency program that's out there. If you find yourself, in having to communicate with a certain group, there are ways that you can get assistance to communicate with your producer. Even, hearing impaired, different things like that. So there's translators, a lot of different things provided for us that are able to comply with policy, as well as to provide resources to some of these individuals that are in these communities. And that is all I have. Thank you, guys.